Today I'm working on this Applause acoustic electric made in Korea in the 1980s. So I'm gonna have to re-radius the fretboard. Having trouble with this. No way to avoid taking big chunks out of it. I tried to heat the frets and it didn't seem to help. If it turns out looking a little ugly, as long as it plays good, I'm okay with that. So my technique is just to get in there and very gently pry it up. Minimalist. You want to bend the fret as little as possible. It is very important to keep track of the order of the frets. At some point you're going to want to take the nut off, so just make sure you don't lose it. You can keep it with the bridge because if you don't take it out and put it away, it might fall out without you noticing. I need to use some sticky tack to hold down the piezo mic. Now as for planing the neck, and get some strips of sandpaper, put down some masking tape, super glue time. I'm gonna turn the fan on. Plane the neck dead flat. Just start out with a couple gentle slides and then see where you're at. The chips are really coming off from where I took the frets out. It's purely an aesthetic issue. I just want to make sure if it's not 100% level, that the high E side is the side that's lower, and also that the fretboard is a little lower, closer to the sound hole. But again, try to just get it 100% flat and level. So I don't want to take off too much of the fretboard, because I'm going to do the final sanding with the radius block. Okay, so now I've got the fretboard almost completely and totally dead flat. If anything, there's a little bit more lean toward the high E string, and there's a little bit of fall away toward the sound hole. It's pretty much 100% dead flat, making it a little bit easier to play and to give it the proper action when you're leveling the frets. I'm being really careful not to scratch up the body. I'll want to get out the pencil. You'll know it's evenly radiused. Sand it. And if the pencil's all wearing off pretty evenly, quickly, then you know it must be even. Evenly radiused and as flat as it possibly can be. So my hope is that I don't have to resaw the fret slots. If I sand off too much off the top, then they definitely won't be deep enough. Bend the fret back into shape with a pair of pliers. To put a fret back in, get it right up to the binding. Just get it stuck, then hammer it down. At this point, I'm finding I can't get the frets to sit nice and flat. It's because the fret slots aren't deep enough. I think if I recut the fret slots and glue them in, everything will be smooth and the whole fret from end to end will be sitting nice and flat against the fretboard. To do this, I just use a coping saw blade that is screwed onto a little block of wood. It's cheap, it's easy, it works great. After I went in with the coping saw blade and got my depths right, I widening the slots. It's an extra thin hacksaw blade. This particular blade still be thinner than the barbs on the frets. Got the frets back on, and it's time to put super glue on the ends. Getting rid of the excess super glue. Getting all the fret ends flush. I'll go in and quickly roll, and I'll roll the edges. The next thing to do before I level them is blue the frets with a marker. So first I'm just going to do a rough job of leveling and test it out. When I put the finishing touches on, I'll do it at tension while the strings are on. After the first pass, they're getting pretty level, but I'm going to go over them a second time in red. Not bad, I can't wait to put the strings on and give it a test run. Before I took the strings off, I was messing around with the piezo mic. I noticed sometimes it was working and sometimes it wasn't. So my first guess of what the problem could be, a wire that's come loose. So to check on the wires, and just take the piezo out. Okay, the mic itself looks good. So the next thing is to take a look at the jack. So basically I just unscrew the nut, pulled the jack out of the sound hole. Here's the piezo mic, and here's the jack, and this is supposed to connect. I'm gonna resolder that. I want to cut off a little bit of the plastic, expose some more wire. Always remember safety. Then it's pretty simple. Tin the iron. It didn't really want to stick. I can see why it came off. But I've definitely got it on there now. Unfortunately, I won't be able to test it till I get the strings back on this guitar, but it should be working great. While restringing the guitar, I noticed one of the shafts on one of the tuning keys is loose, and I can't tune it up, so I'm going to take it off of there and see if I can fix it. So now I need to take the back part off. You can see the appeal of open back tuners. It's easy enough to pry it off with a screwdriver, but don't bend it too much or it won't stay on when you put it back on. In fact, you want to bend it back the opposite way before you pop it back on. Inside you can see there's just a loose screw. The screw is tightened back on, so I'll squeeze the plate back so it'll pop back on there. Alright, so I got a plan. Does the pickup work? It's not the best pickup to start with, but I think it's sounding pretty good. Next step is to adjust the height of the bridge. I'd like to get it lower because I took off a lot of material from the fretboard and the frets, so they've lowered and I want to lower the bridge. When I got this guitar, the bridge was already as low as it can get here in the saddle, so I have to lower the saddle while still keeping room for the piezo in there. Next I'm going to lower the wood around where the bridge goes on the saddle. It's just rosewood, so I can just put some wood oil on it and it'll be good as new. Don't have to refinish it. So I've taken down the saddle around where the bridge goes, but left enough that it can still hold the bridge and cover the piezo mic. Now I have to adjust the height of the bridge itself to get the action as low as possible without being too low. I'm gonna use this piece of wood here, test it out, sanding it down lower and lower. When I get it to the perfect height, I'll just trace it onto the other bridge. Can always lower it. You can never raise it back up. I've got the wooden bridge in and it's getting closer to the height I want, but I want to take another pass at leveling the frets, this time at tension. So I'm going to put this little string lifter under the strings here, and this lifter puts the strings at the height at the very top of the nut slot. Okay, now it's all tuned up. You could actually play a slide guitar with this thing in there if you wanted. Next thing to do is slide the fret bar under the string. First on one side, then the other. So the part with the sandpaper is actually under the strings while it's all tuned up. If you ever noticed when putting on a new set of strings, how when they're all loose, the neck is not bowed at all, but then when you tighten it up, the neck gets pulled back. So if you're leveling the frets, you can be a little more precise if you level them at tension. And you just keep making passes till all the red's taken off. I've now got the wooden bridge sanded down to just above the saddle, which is sanded down to just above the piezo. I had to do a little more leveling, but all the frets are playing without buzz right now. And the action on the high E string at the 12th fret is about exactly 1/16 or 4/64 of an inch. That should work out nicely. So I'm ready to crown the frets. Now I'm going to do some fret crowning. You can see I've blued the fret again. I'm going to avoid taking anything directly off the top and just take some material off the sides so that it's kind of pyramid shaped on top. This is one of the things that takes the longest, especially if you've taken a lot off of the frets when leveling them. But when you get in the groove, everything should go pretty smoothly. After the frets are crowned, I like to go in with a scrub pad. This is finer than sandpaper. After that, I like to use some steel wool, grade 4/0s. Get everything as smooth as possible. It may be hard to see on camera, but in person it's easy to tell when you've polished the fret. It's real shiny and real smooth, smooth like silk. One of the few remaining things to do, then to file down the nut slot. These are mostly okay, but the low E was a little high. I'm only going to file till I see that there's a little bit of dust, and you want to make sure to have the right break angle, and it slopes downward on the headstock side. You can use a string as a feeler gauge to tell you exactly how many millimeters the string is up off the fret. Measure twice, cut once. If you have an old guitar case or an old amp that has the Tolex peeling off, there's a pretty quick, easy, cheap way to fix it. That's contact cement. All you do is shake it up first, then in a ventilated area, brush it on pretty thin, kind of like paint, but don't press the surfaces together right away. You gotta let it sit for 15 minutes. Then just let it sit. You can let it sit for longer than 15 minutes and less than 2 hours. I've let it sit for 30 minutes. All you gotta do now is carefully and firmly press it down like a piece of tape, and it will be stuck like that forever. And it will be stuck like that forever. If you just want to fix a littler tear, put a drop of glue on it, and then just use a piece of tape to hold it down while it dries. Give it 24 hours and remove the tape, and you're good to go. Plugged into the pig nose. Little bit of scratchiness in the pots.